me tell you what we're going to do for this year. Not today, but we're going to start next week. We're going to do a new series called Marked by Jesus. How many of you can guess which book of the Bible we're going to go through? Yeah. The book of Ed. That's right. Ed was that 13th disciple that you probably didn't hear about. And so we're going to go through that. It's kind of cool. No, we're going to maybe go through the book of Mark and the Gospel of Mark. And it's going to take a long time. But what I think is going to happen is you're going to see the life of Jesus played out in front of you. And Mark is very visual. I mean, he's always talking about things that you can see. And immediately Jesus goes here and does this thing. And it's like a movie taking place in front of you. And so I don't know if you know this, but I'm really excited about that series. Not as excited about giving the message today, but I was really excited about that. In fact, I was going to start that one, and I said, no, we have to do this, but I really want to get going on that. And so I am completely jazzed. Josh probably won't be able to speak all year because I will want to talk about it. But anyway, he'll find something else to do. No. And what we're going to try to do, and if you go a couple slides ahead, do you guys know what a gospel parallel is? It's kind of a deep theological thing, and it's basically the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all wrote about similar things, but not exactly the same things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on Mark, but we're also going to at least help us learn about Jesus from all the gospel writers. So what we're going to help you do, and like this, Mark 1 through 13 we'll do next week, but there are also other places in the Gospels, Matthew, Luke, and John, where they talk about the similar events, the same sort of thing. And so we're going to have one of these things for you each week, and I would love it, absolutely love it, if you would say, okay, I am going to commit myself to reading these things ahead of time, to see what the gospel writers were trying to show us about the life of Jesus and how we should reflect that life. And so we'll do this each week, and then you can just read that. And it will not take very long to read those things. And we're also going to do a Bible study. The one great thing about the building almost being done is that I don't have to be a construction worker half the time. So, which is, I love construction, and it's fun, and I hate painting. But anyway, I can go back to more full-time ministry. And so I want to start a Bible study on Tuesday nights. And the moment I announce that, somebody says, oh, can it not be on Tuesday? And it's like, okay, and I'm just a sucker. I'll give you a hint. If you're a lady and you cry, you can have anything you want. It's like, sure, yeah, we'll do it on, what time? Tuesday at 3 a.m.? Yeah, sure, I'll do it. Just how it works. But anyway, so this Tuesday night, we're going to meet and study Mark a little bit, and so if you want to come and do that with me, and it's not like I'm not going to like baby bird it, like vomit it into your mouth. It's not, Do you understand that phrase? I'm not going to feed you. We are going to study together. We're going to learn together as a community of people looking at the life of Jesus. And also, what's happening on Tuesday night, and this is maybe more important, and so don't worry, we'll do this Bible study all year long. Financial Peace University. How many of you know what that is? We've been talking about it for a while. Financial Peace University starts this week, Tuesday at 6:30 as well. There is childcare. That's why I did this, because there's childcare. Here, let me see. I said a number of things about this. One, it costs $100, and I understand if you're in a tight budget, that seems pretty steep. And so I said last service that Josh, if you go through it, you pay $100 and you go through it and you don't like it, Josh will pay your money back. And then somebody over here laughed really loud, and so I said, never mind. Don Tabbert will pay you your $100 back. And then somebody else, Claudine Lyons, said, hey, I loved it so much. If somebody doesn't like it, I'll pay their $100 back. And so it's like really cool. We're getting all this money in, and it's kind of nice. So anyway, if you want to go through it, we'd love for you to do that, and even to skip the Bible study for a couple of weeks and learn how to handle your money and honor God with it. Do it in a way that honors God and the way that frees you up to experience peace in your financial life. How many of you would say right now, especially after Christmas, you shouldn't have spent that much? How many of you say, oh, I feel a little tight, a little constricted financially? Anybody? Anybody feel that way? If you come to FPU, I think it will really help you. Let's see, there were other things I was going to say, because that way you wouldn't have to say it at the end. Anything else interesting? Can I do it all? Can I do it all right now? Hey, this Saturday, there's the men's breakfast. Nope. January 20th is the men's breakfast, and it's at 9 o'clock. See, I'm kind of like a dummy. He's really got his hand up my back. It's at 9 o'clock, and we're going to talk about provision, God's provision, and we're going to have bacon. So look at that. It's what else? The other thing. What's the other thing? Look at that. Okay, here. We're just going to take a moment and read for a while. And I guess I'm nervous to talk about what I'm going to talk about. That's why I'm holding off a little bit. Guess what we're talking about today? How many of you here are for the first time? Anybody? Anybody? And you knew that you really want to go to church today because they were going to talk about money. It never fails. Hey, first time here, guess what we're talking about? Money. Everybody's favorite topic. We actually are talking about money, but not in the same way that you might think. We're talking about a generous life, living a generous life. If you know what we're about here at One Hope, we say that we're trying to raise up passionate disciples who love sacrificially. And part of that, I think, is being able to be generous, to use your resources, your money, to help people in need and to advance the kingdom of God. And so we're going to talk out of this book, 1 Timothy. Timothy is one of my favorite guys in the world because, I've been to his hometown. Hometown is Lystra. It's in modern-day Turkey. It's kind of a small town. He went from that small town and he wound up in Ephesus, a big city, Ephesus, and he was the pastor there. And he had just saw some amazing things happen in Ephesus. But then a group of pastors came, or leaders, or teachers, or whatever you want to call them, and they started kind of changing the message of Jesus. And they started changing it and started talking about things that really weren't that important. But the big thing was they were trying to make it appear that following Jesus was a good way to get rich. I think it was probably for their purposes, but that was kind of the message that they taught, and it was different than certainly than the message that Jesus came and brought, but it was also definitely the different message than Paul and Timothy were trying to get out into the lives of the people in Ephesus. And so I'm going to read a large chunk of the scripture, and then we'll go through it kind of slowly. And so strap in. Sorry about the topic, but I think it really, at the end, you'll say, I'm really glad I was here. About generous living. This is what he says, and Paul is talking to Timothy, this young pastor, and he says, "Hey, teach these things, Timothy, and encourage everyone to obey them. Some people may contradict our teaching, but these are the wholesome teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. These teachings promote a godly life. Anyone who teaches something different is arrogant and lacks understanding. Such a person has an unhealthy desire to quibble over the meaning of words. This stirs up arguments and jealousy and division, slander and suspicions. These people always cause trouble. Their minds are corrupt, and they have turned their backs on the truth. To them, a show of godliness is just a way to become wealthy. Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows." And I'm going to skip to verse 17, which we rarely do around here, but it's the same topic. Verse 17 says, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up for themselves treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience true life." Long passage. We'll go back try to help you understand what Paul is explaining to Timothy and helping him get to the point where he can teach correctly. Sound doctrine is what he says, but also for the goal of people living the kind of life that God has called them to. And it's really in the beginning of 1 Timothy. I'll tell you what he writes. He's left Macedonia. Paul has left there, but he urges Timothy to stay in Ephesus. And he says, and to stop those whose teaching is contrary to the truth. Don't let them waste their time in endless discussion of myths and spiritual pedigrees. These things only lead to meaningless speculations which don't help people live a life of faith in God. So he's trying to say, hey, what I want you to do is teach things so that you can live a faithful life in God, life of faith in God. The purpose of my instruction, Paul says about himself, is that all believers would be filled with love that comes from a pure heart, a clear conscience, and a genuine faith. But some people have missed the whole point. They've turned away from these things and spend their time in meaningless discussions. They want to be known as teachers of the law of Moses, but they don't know what they're talking about, even though they speak so confidently. As we kind of begin a year of studying the Gospels, the Gospel of Mark, I want you to understand, as Paul says, my goal or his goal in teaching is that people would be filled with love. I just cracked. My voice just cracked. Finally, I'm going through puberty. Sorry, I don't know where that's coming from. I have a cold. I don't know, maybe. Filled with love. Living a life of, we call it sacrificial love, that comes from a clear heart, pure heart, clear conscience, and a sincere faith. Anybody watch Friday Night Lights? Friday Night Lights, great show. Like I said, I know all the volleyball girls primarily because two of them are mine. The daughters are mine. And so Friday Night Lights, right? Before the game starts, what do you say? Clear eyes, full heart? Can't lose. Clear eyes, full heart. Can't lose. That's the whole thing. I think Paul is saying that to the team. Like, clear eyes, full heart. Can't lose. That's what he's calling us to, a generous kind of life. And yet he says, those teachers, they're horrible. They're trying to contradict our teaching. And this is back in chapter 6. The wholesome teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ are, hey, you're filled with love. Clear eyes, full heart. You can't lose. Anyone who teaches something else is arrogant and lacks understanding. Such a person has unhealthy desires to quibble over the meaning of words, stirs up arguments, jealousy, division, slander, suspicions. They're always causing trouble. Their minds are corrupt. To them, and this is verse 5, a show of godliness is just a way to become wealthy. Luckily, this kind of teaching was only like 2,000 years ago in Ephesus. These days, nobody stands up like where I'm at and says, you know what, follow Jesus and you'll be wealthy. He will bless you. Nobody does that, right? You've never seen it on television. And so luckily it's just back in there. So we don't have to worry about it. Now, isn't it funny that at times there are people who actually stand up and say, oh, you follow Jesus and he will give you all that you want. You want a Mercedes? You can have. You want a big house? You want healing? And it's like, I could probably pull it off, couldn't I? I got it in me. But Paul says that's not what following Jesus is about. And here's the crazy thing. They don't preach that too often in places I've been, like Haiti and the Philippines, especially not in Manila. I mean, obviously they do it in Manila because it's like Western, but like in the poor villages, in Honduras, they just don't preach that because it's not the truth. Jesus came to offer us true wealth, true riches. And that's very different than worldly wealth and worldly riches. Now, he goes in verse 6, and this is a kind of a crucial passage, this part of the teaching. True godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. True godliness with contentment is what you're looking for. It's what most people will try to buy, but in fact, God offers it free of charge. Now, the playoffs started this yesterday, and so they're today and then next week, and then in a couple weeks, we will all sit down to worship. at the American religion of stuff, right? There's a game in between, but then every once in a while it comes on. Sometimes there's 60 seconds, sometimes there's 30 seconds, and they preach the message that as long as you have this, you will be content. If you have this car or this beer or these chips, if you have Doritos, if you have Doritos, your life is going to be full. Come on, can I get an amen? And it's and that's what the American culture kind of preaches to us. If as long as you have stuff, then you will be not just content, but you will be thriving. And that's what we're meant. We're going to thrive. And it's like Paul has a completely different message for us. He says, true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. You can have that great wealth right now. Now, the idea of godliness, he talks about godliness just a couple chapters before in 1 Timothy 4:7. He talks about the idea that some people really like to go into physical training. And there are some people here, I hope, that are way better at this than me. You know, that they lift weights and they run. And, of course, it's first of the year. And so everybody's losing weight. So they're on the treadmill. They're running. Hopefully you're not running outside. It's cold out there. Running indoors and you're lifting and all that. And you're going into physical training. The reason is because you want to live better now. But he says physical training, though it's of some value, it's not the best thing. He says, instead, train yourself to be godly. Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life. It's good for now, and it's also good for later. Becoming like Jesus, the idea of godliness, is a great goal. Spending time with him in his word, praying, experiencing his power, his presence, his grace, changing from who you are into who he would like you to be, more and more like Jesus. Godliness is great gain. And then the other thing is the idea of being content. I'll read the passage in Philippians. Everybody uses this. A lot of times they put it on their shoe if they're an athlete. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Right? They usually put that as the only part of the passage that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Do you know what the rest of the verse says? He's talking about people who have cared for him over the years and been concerned about him, but who have never had a chance to help him. And now he's really struggling, and they were able to offer up like some financial gift. And so he says, thank you so much. You finally were able to do what your heart wanted to do, and that is to help me out. But I don't need it, because he says, I have learned how to be content whether I have everything that I need or whether I have absolutely nothing. I don't know, I'll probably date myself here, but how many of you know the movie Overboard? Overboard? Goldie Hawn? Yeah, I know everybody was like 50 or so. I'll tell you a little bit about the Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, and then Roddy McDowall, who played Cornelius in Planet of the Apes. Important part of the story, I'm sure. So these are the characters. So Goldie Hawn playing as a character that she is just absolutely loaded beyond belief. And she is on her big yacht, and they're, kind of going down over the West Coast, and her yacht gets stuck. It's not working well, and so while she's there, she says, well, I'm going to do something. I got to spend money on something. And so she brings in a carpenter to do a shoe rack in her incredibly huge closet on her incredibly huge yacht. And she is so snooty. She is so arrogant. She's so haughty. She's just thumbing her nose at everybody. And Kurt Russell, who walks in like redneck, I'll do that for you. And she just is disgusted by him. He does this really cool thing where the racks kind of move around and all these shoes come out, and she just thinks it's ridiculous. What? Why'd you make it out of oak? It has to be cedar. Everything is cedar because, she's just that way. Well, funny thing happens. She falls off the yacht, and in the cold water, she loses her memory. And so she's stuck in a hospital. Nobody knows who she is. Obviously, she's from some faraway place in her beautiful yacht. And Kurt Russell sees it and says, oh, I can play a little game with her. And so he goes to the hospital, says that she's his wife, and takes her home to watch his horrible 4 boys in a ridiculously disgusting house. And so she doesn't know one thing or the, and she starts doing it. And in the beginning, it's really funny because she's so bad at it, but eventually she gets pretty good at it. And she begins to take an interest in these boys, and she begins to kind of nurture them and care for them. And it's kind of interesting because she becomes very kind and gracious and even so far as loving. And then her memory comes back, and she's like, wait a second. And she goes back to the ship, and then there's this really cool scene in the kitchen with Roddy McDowell. Cornelius, let's call him. Planet of the Apes. And they're talking about what their life was like before this whole thing happened, and how horrible she was, and all the things that she made him do to serve her. And he said like this amazing thing to her. He said, you know, very often most people only go through life in one place. Either they have very little or they have a lot. And you have been given this incredible gift that you have seen both. And now you realize that all of this stuff made you miserable, a horrible human being. And when it was all taken away, you began to value things that are truly important. And now you could choose. Now you decide. Paul says when they offer this incredible gift, not that I was ever in need, for I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little, for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. He understands, Paul understands, that what he desperately needs is Christ. And with Christ, no matter if you have a lot or if you have nothing, you have all that you need. Godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. Now, he goes on. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. I was thinking about that verse. I was going to kind of move into something, but I don't even think I can go there. Anyway, next verse. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. Now, how many of you would say in America, as you live in America, that you are content just knowing that you have enough food to eat today and you'll be warm and that you have a place to stay? How many of you, just that alone, you go, because you know you have God? Or how many of you would say, you know what, there are times when I'm just not content. There are times with when what I have, it does not feel like enough. Because I want this and I want that and I want that. It's not that you need them, but that you want them. And more than likely, it's because you've seen it in somebody else. You know what that word is? It's covetousness. It's wanting what somebody else has even though you have plenty. Wanting to take it from them. Or greed, wanting more money than you have. And not just wanting, but like craving after it. That's what he starts to talk about. Paul is going to first talk about people who aren't wealthy but want to be. They're desiring it. And then he's going to talk to people who are already rich. So he breaks the crowd up into two groups. He says people who long to be rich. And I think he says that very nice. Like he doesn't say, hey, you, I know you want to be rich. He just says, hey, hypothetically, people who want to be rich. And so it's kind of a gracious way of introducing the topic. People who long to be rich, and listen to these words, they fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. I mean, how more visual can he make that? They fall. I mean, think just walking to poof, on your face. They're trapped. I mean, just think of an animal, like what it clamps down on their leg and they They can't move. They even want to chew their leg off, or they plunge. I was thinking about somebody walking across like ice. Of course, this would never happen right now because the ice is about 7 foot thick. But like if they went through ice and all of a sudden they plunged into the frigid water. I mean, how foolish would that be? Thinking there are a few people here who took the polar plunge, and how crazy is that? I mean, they literally weigh 80 pounds each. They went in their bathing suits. They went in the water, and I thought, I just feel bad. I give you a little bit of my fat to kind of warm you up. But it's not that they're willingly doing that. What happens, I think, in our lives when we want for things that we really don't have the means to get, and we continue to want them, and we often, and at least in America, we go out and get them, and we do it at our peril, because then all of a sudden we fall, and we're trapped by this horrible debt, and we plunge our lives into this financial ruin. Those are the words that he uses, harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. How many of you at some time in your life have ever bought something that you didn't have the money to pay for, but you did it on credit, and later on you realized that it was one of the most foolish choices you'd ever make? Dave Ramsey, the guy that does the FPU, the Financial Peace University, always talks about the idea of going out to eat and paying for it with credit. So like you eat it, and it goes through, and it goes out, and then for the next year and a half, you're paying 3 times more, and it's already gone down the toilet, literally. And it's like, what other stuff do we buy like that? And by the time we've paid it off, it's either broken or long gone, or we aren't even enjoying it anymore. And yet God says, hey, if you can trust me and pursue me and be content with what I have, you are already wealthy now. You don't have to buy anything to try to appear. Well, one of my favorite phrases we buy things we don't want to impress people we don't like. Of course, I don't have anybody that I don't like, but how many of you have ever done that? Oh, if I get that, these people won't be impressed. And you go, I don't want that, and I don't like them. How foolish is that? For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, let me say what that doesn't say. It doesn't say money is evil. And it doesn't say money is, it says the root, it's actually a root. The word says the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. So it's not the only thing that is a root of evil. Lust and power are really good too. They will go toward evil really quick. But it's not even, it's the love of money. It's craving after it, desiring it, wanting it more than life itself, wanting it more than God. That's what the love of money is. And some people, he says, not all, some, craving money have wandered from the true faith, literally meaning they have bailed from the faith. They have bailed from really trusting in God and seeking Him for all that they need and looking for other things, wealth and stuff. They have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Man, fall, plunge, pierce themselves. I don't know if you know, but when I hear the word pierce, I think of Jesus on the cross and the pain that He endured for us so that we would never have to worry about this. And I think when we look for things to satisfy us, to give us a rush, and we go out and we buy them even though we can't afford them, it really destroys us. It brings all kinds of pain. Now, I say all that, not all that, for a certain reason, but really, wouldn't it be great to learn how to get out of debt? How many of you right now, if you were just out of debt, and then we won't even talk about houses, because that's a kind of an investment. If you had no debt, how would your life be different? Whoever does the bills right now is computing. We pay this. What's that total on a monthly basis? If you had that wasn't going to pay off your debt and you just had it, would you have any more freedom in your life? Would you have Could you enjoy some of that? And maybe next, and what we're going to talk about then, would there be a possibility of sharing that with people in need that would bring you joy that what you have bought with it before never brought you? It's going on to verse 17. Now he's going to talk about people who are rich. And before we go into this, I want to just say, you're rich, by the way. You're in America, and so because you're not in Africa or South America, for the most part, you are richer than about 95% of the people in the world. And so you may feel poor, but you're not. And so just thought I'd share that with you before we talk about this. Verse 17 says, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. They should trust, their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Now, that's a nice little saying there. You know, he richly gives us things so that we can enjoy it. Now, I want to go back into the Old Testament because there's an interesting passage in the Old Testament that talks about this time where the people of Israel, they've been enslaved in Egypt, and they've had absolutely nothing in their life. I mean, they had to work constantly, but they have nothing to show for it. They were giving almost nothing to eat. It was a horrible experience. And God takes them out of Egypt. He allows them to wander through the desert for 40 years, and then he's going to bring them into a place that's called the Promised Land, and everything there is basically going to be given to them. I mean, it's not a bad deal. If you're going from slavery and bondage and nothing to a place where everything is already built for you, sown for you like seeds, the fields are already planted, there are already horses and calves, and I mean, everything is there. And he says about that experience, he says, I'm a little nervous, God says. I'm a little nervous about bringing you into this place because even though you had nothing here and you wandered through the desert and I tried to teach you in that time because you didn't have any food, so I gave you on a daily basis, I gave you all the food you needed. He even says this, he says, your clothes never even fell apart. Like, I could have worn this sweater for 40 years. Awesome. I look like a grandpa, I look warm and cuddly, and like I'm approachable, which is completely different than I really am, and so it's awesome. For 40 years, they didn't need clothing, they didn't need food, and he was teaching them, saying, guess what? I will provide for you. I will be the one who gives you everything you need. But he says, he's a little nervous. He says, I did this experience where you got your food in the morning from me, your clothing didn't wear out because it was from me. I did this to humble you and test you for your own good. God says, I did all of that so you would never say to yourself, I've achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. I mean, have you ever, I hate to go from the Old Testament right into The Simpsons, but there's a great Simpsons episode where they're sitting around the table and Homer's going to pray to bless the food, right? And he says something about, I don't know, it's like a prayer that everyone says. I don't know what those are because I can't remember it from my childhood. But basically, God, thank you for your blessing, your rich blessing, for providing this food for the, fulfillment of our bodies or something like that. And all of a sudden, Bart says, wait a second, why are you thanking God for that? Dad, you went and worked, and you got the paycheck, and you gave the money to Mom, and Mom went and bought the food, and she prepared the food. We did this. This is us. And I think sometimes we think that. And no, you didn't. God alone gave you the ability to get what you have. He gave you the strength, the ability to work, to get the money. I mean, that's what he says. He says, remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you the power to be successful, the ability to gain wealth. This is all from God. It's not from us. It's from God alone. And yet we oftentimes think, oh yeah, that's what I did. No, he says your trust should be in God, who richly gives us, provides us all that we need for our enjoyment. See, this doesn't have to be a drudgery thing. You don't have to, plod through life just barely making it. No, he provides things so that you can experience joy with the people you love. Going back to Overboard, the amazing thing, the transformation that this woman has is that she didn't have any kids before, and all of a sudden she has these 4 boys who were rotten. They were horrible. Watch the movie. And then all of a sudden the family changes, the dynamic changes, and these kids care for this woman who's not even their mom, but they call her mom, and they don't want her to leave because she's impacted them. An amazing thing happens when we can be content with what we have and bless God for what he's given them. And then the last little part of the passage, it says, tell them to use their money to do good. See, money can be a great tool in the hands of people who understand who God is and why he's given them blessings. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. Another biblical translation says that they will find the life that is truly life. See, you can find a life and you can live that kind of life, or you can come into the place where you experience God's presence, his provision, meaning his blessing, and you're content with that, and you draw closer to Jesus, and he transforms you to make you more and more like him, and you can experience a different kind of life, and he calls it life that is truly life. And then you can live a generous life. And when you do that, you will find greater joy than anything you have ever purchased. Because this thing was purchased for you. Because Jesus knew our problem, that we would always be seeking after our own stuff, that we would be always self-centered, that we would always be turning our back on God. And so he came to us, Jesus came to us, went to the cross, paid a price that we could never pay, took all of our sin upon himself so that we could be made right with God, and he would offer this kind of life that is so different. Contentment, godliness, it is great wealth. Let's pray.